Hi, my name is Rob Earlham, Senior Developer Advocate here at Sitecore. And in this video, we're going to be talking all about Sitecore Search. Specifically, how you can debug any crawling issues you might run into when setting up your different index sources. So, let's dive in. Okay, so I've loaded up the back end of Sitecore Search here, and we're going to set up a new index source we're going to be working with today, and that's going to be indexing the content on Sitecore's developer portal. So, let's start by adding an index source, and we'll just call this dev portal. We'll copy that into the description as well. And we're going to use the advanced web crawler today. Once we've done that, it's going to load up this new index source for us and let us start to configure it. The good thing about the developer portal is it has a really actively maintained sitemap. So that makes it really easy to index the content there. I've got that open in the next tab here. So we can copy that URL, and this sitemap gives us a full list of every page we're going to want to index on the dev portal. So let's hop back to search, and we're going to work some really simple examples to show how this is working today. The first thing we're going to do is set up the trigger. And as I said, we're going to be working with a sitemap trigger today. So we'll just add in the URL for that sitemap trigger. And then the last thing we're going to do here is set up a document extractor. We're going to be working with JavaScript extractors today because the most times when you're going to run into issues with your crawling is going to be when you're working with the JavaScript-based logic. You're not really going to run into errors when working with XPath and things. You may end up with a query that doesn't return any data, but it's actually going to throw an error. Whereas when you're creating logic in things like your document extractors based on JavaScript, you could have some errors in there, which is what we're going to simulate today to show how you can debug it. So we're going to start with a JavaScript document extractor. We're just going to use the default output. I'm not really fussed about what it's pulling out here, but I am going to add in the source field as well, just so we know that this comes from the dev portal. We can save that. We'll save that document extractor, and that's all we're going to do to configure this. We're going to publish this. We'll trigger a rescan straight away, and hopefully this should come back with a successful scan of the dev portal, and then afterwards we can break it and see how we go about actually debugging it. So we go back to our source list now. We can see our recrawl or our initial crawl of the dev portal is queued up now. So this is going to take a few minutes to run through, so we'll check back in when it's completed. Okay, so this is finished indexing now. If we go and take a look into the index source, we can see we've got 192 documents successfully crawled. If we use this little tab up here, we can actually start to get some analytics on what was crawled as well, how long it took, and this job run that was successful. Scrolling down, you can see we have the single job run that just ran. It was successful, so it's got this light blue color. And we get some information about when it started, when it stopped, the duration, and the amount of indexes, the amount of items indexed as well. Okay, so let's break it and see what happens. I'm going to go down to my document extractor, and we're just going to really make sure this breaks. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw a new error in here. And we're going to say document could not be indexed. Now, this is obviously a very extreme example. You're probably not going to be throwing exceptions in your JavaScript extractors. However, it's a good representation of what could happen if your logic isn't correct and there are issues in your code which cause it to fail and the indexing to not run properly. So let's save that. We will save the update here. We'll publish once more, and again, we'll trigger a rescan. Okay, if we go back to our sources page, so we can see we're queued up once more. Again, this is going to take a few minutes to run, so what I'm going to do is we'll check back in afterwards, and hopefully we'll be able to debug some of the issues that we're seeing. Okay, so we're back again now, and we can clearly see this index crawl has failed, as we expected it to. So the first thing we can do here is hover over this little triangle, and we'll get an overview of why it's failed. Realistically, you're probably not going to be in a scenario where every single document has failed like this one. You may be in a scenario where only a handful of your actual index documents have failed, so this may be a less complete list than you're seeing, but you can see we're starting to get information about what's gone wrong here. Once more, we can click into the source itself, and we can see we get a few more details in here. Again, starting to dig into why this has failed. If we look into the analytics panel we saw earlier, we can now see our second run here, showing in red, showing that this is a failed run. Looking down here, we get the time it ran, the duration, and this time it didn't index any documents, which is what we were expecting. It was throwing an error on every single one. If we use this View in Analytics button though, this is going to give you some really valuable information if you're trying to figure out what's ended up in your index and why it's ended up in there. If things are missing, if certain things have failed, it's super useful. So scrolling down, it looks very similar to the last page, but we can actually now click on this index run that failed and start to drill into what happened. So we can see here, it's only working on 10 pages at a time, so it's going to give us the first 10 index results. We can drop down and see an overview here, but we can also click on View Details, and this is going to give us the actual error being thrown. Remember, this was the text that we threw in our exception, so document could not be indexed, and we can see that for each of the different documents that were crawled. Looking down below, we can also get different information about how the run went. So the specs were analyzed, it started crawling it started trying to index it, but then it failed basically while it was doing that. So it tried to crawl 192 pages, which is the correct number. That's how many we crawled successfully the first time, but it didn't actually manage to succeed in any because we were throwing that exception. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the different tooling provided in Search to help you debug any crawling issues that you're running into when setting up your index searches. Hopefully that'll help you get the data you need into your search indexes as quickly as possible. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out the Discover Sitecore YouTube channel for future videos.